All right. Welcome to the Aspiration Avenue, video cast empowering entrepreneurs on their path to success. I'm Austin.
I'm George.
And welcome to the show. So today we're going to be talking about the challenges of being your own boss, a topic pretty near and dear to both of our hearts as entrepreneurs. But really excited about this one. Kicking it off, I want to talk about what inspires people to start businesses in the first place, and how far will inspiration alone take you? What do you think, George?
Well, there's a number of different reasons for somebody wanting to become an entrepreneur. One, it's most commonly viewed by a lot of people is being your own boss. Why do you want to be your own boss? Well, if your current boss is in the wrong position and you feel you could do better and you would treat better your employees better than what your boss is treating you and other employees, that can be a strong motivator. The another reason is to make substantially more money. That is possible. However, it takes a significant amount of determination and doing a lot of right things before that can be realized. But it's a worthy goal if it's used and approached in a common sense sort of way. There's some people, depending on who they are, may want to be an active retiree. There's a number of people who have been very successful in their particular line of business, whatever it may be. But now that they've reached a certain point in their life, they want to have a business or two or three, depending on the circumstances of the individual, and they seek to run a business, provide some activity, provide some added positive, assumedly positive cash flow, and that works for them. It all depends. Now, regarding inspiration, that inspiration in my mind is what gets people out of their chair. And that will last provided, and it'll evolve actually into what I like to call motivation, if there's proper and realistic goals that have been set so that the inspiration might last two steps away from the chair. The motivation to keep on going that will make a difference. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're kind of nailing a topic on that. How far your inspiration will take. Like the chair is a good metaphor because you take the first two steps, and that's a conscious or inspired decision, right? But then what a lot of people then are like, they realize taking steps is hard. And so then the motivation kind of becomes like your commitment to continue to just walk. Put one foot in front of the other. You really simplify it. You don't make it this grandiose, inspiring. It's no longer this grandiose, inspiring task that you have to conquer. Like, you have to have the habit to kind of back it up. I think a lot of people start businesses too for the right reasons that you stated. And then if they don't set like the vision that aligns with it, they lose their target along the way. Or sometimes people start businesses with weak whys, but don't establish the motivation to continue, the inspiration by your definition. You know, like, you get sold on the idea of like franchising a business or opening a business as an easy way to escape from the 9 to 5 grind, right? And that becomes all great and dandy while you're researching and you're really excited about the tactic, but then you got to pick up the phone and make cold calls. You have to overcome like an anxiety that you have, and a lot of people might kind of crumble under that pressure. So I think it takes you to step one. And then I think establishing habits and core activities that you need to facilitate in your business, writing down your goals, your vision, like you said, George, is really kind of the key to keeping that going.
I do have a question for you, and you kind of touched upon it a moment or so ago, that what would you say are some of the obstacles that business owners have experienced or are experiencing as they've moving forward with their business?
I think my big two, and these were very true to my heart when I started my business, is my biggest one is habit forming, which I kind of alluded to earlier. You know, it's like I remember working the 9 to 5 during the pandemic. One of the hardest things in the world was getting established with remote work because you just broke all of your habits of going into the office and the expectation for when you were on, when you're going to get a coffee, when you're checking your phone, that kind of thing. None of us are perfect, right? We're not grinding 8 hours a day straight or 10 hours a day straight like we perceive that we are necessarily, especially if you're sitting in kind of an office role. And so there's always breaks uh, in the flow of things. And so I think that habit forming is number one because now you're breaking the routine and you're starting from scratch, and so you need to be the one to establish the expectations for yourself. And going back to the first question, motivation is needs to be in present. It needs to push you to accomplish tasks and certain things on a day-to-day basis. You're not going to wake up every day and have your most inspired day of all time. It's like going to the gym. So that's number one. And then I think closely related to that for me was work versus effort identification. So moving away from the perceived value of I put in 10 hours today, I put in 11 hours. The world doesn't care when you're an entrepreneur anymore. What matters is what actually gets done. So perceiving your effort as saying I was on the clock a lot today is a surefire way to just burn out really quickly, because you'll work on the lowest value tasks sometimes that you're the most comfortable with. Instead of running an ad or building a website, you'll watch a YouTube video about running an ad or building a website or read a book about it. And that's great. I'm not saying that business owners shouldn't have continued education, but you can't let your continued education be that low-hanging fruit to enable you to take continued inaction when you know that that's an important criteria or step to move your business forward. So I think those for me are two of the biggest challenges I see. I face myself, but I see other business owners face. What about you, George?
Well, just picking up on your continuing education, I think there could be a few words added after that. Continued education must lead to continued application of whatever it is that's learned by watching the videos on YouTube or reading a book or an article. It's what's done with the knowledge that's gained that'll determine the effort versus productivity or actual work. One thing that I have seen all too often is, and it's an obstacle, it's kind of self-induced for some people. It's a failure to use massive doses of common sense. Yeah, because when you're in business, who are your customers? People. Who are your suppliers? People. Who are your employees? People. And people must be treated with respect and fairness at all times, part of common sense interactions between people, but just general business applications. Common sense could be somebody's a genius in the product they're producing or the service they're providing, but they fall short for keeping the business running and keeping what they're doing as a business. So common sense says they hire either as an advisor or an employee areas in which they're falling a little short and which they prefer not to really engage in. So if there's anything else in summary for my comment to your question is the obstacle is failure to use common sense. So I would say, close this my comment right now. I'll let your good sense, also known as your common sense, be your guide.
Perfect. I like that. And then, have you ever questioned, George, like you've been an entrepreneur for many years? Have you ever questioned your decision to be self-employed? And then, like, what triggers that for you, for other entrepreneurs, and how do you kind of move past that?
That's a good question. Good question. What prompted me is I started self-employment actually with a partner back in the early 1980s. And he and I were putting through the result of our top of the production list results money for somebody. We figured, let's keep that money in their pocket. So that's what got me going back in the early 80s. And it really has kept me going along the way. And at this point in my life, I seek to help others in ways that I can, and personally as well as professionally. So that's kind of what helps me put my feet on the floor in the morning, every single morning, is to what can I do to help somebody in some way uh, throughout the day, be it a business owner or be it somebody who's not a business owner but able to help in some way. How about you?
I think my biggest struggle is just generally, especially when I was getting started, was, the imposter syndrome of, okay, my business started very organically. It rose out of a need in the market that I identified with my father. But the moment that you start is the moment that you know the least. And you also don't know what you don't know, where you're inadequate, where you fall short. And then as you start to hit that learning curve of that strive, you realize and you learn all the things that you don't know about or you haven't mastered. And so for me, that always incurred like a heavy dose of imposter syndrome. Have I earned the right to talk to businesses about their problems? Do I really have the solution? Will it work for everybody? And what really helped me personally move past that was that I feel like a majority of entrepreneurs struggle with that. It means you care about the product, it means you care about the result. So it's definitely healthy to have a certain level of imposter syndrome and be here and say, okay, I need to constantly raise the bar. We mentioned continuing education, but not to the point where it's debilitating you from taking action or causing you to work on the wrong activities in your work versus effort identification. You still have to market yourself. You still have to go out there and talk to people and be confident in your ability to help resolve problems for somebody. But at the same time, it's also not good to be that overconfident armchair quarterback who knows everything about everything, because then your practical solutions suffer. You might be very confident in a sales process, but you're not reinvesting or improving kind of your product. So the big thing for me that helped me move past that imposter syndrome is realizing that everybody is somewhere along the lines in the stage of the journey, right? Like if you imagine as entrepreneurship or topical expertise as the K through 12 education system, I might be in seventh grade in terms of my knowledge and mastery of marketing applications. That should empower me to be able to teach first and second graders, new entrepreneurs who have different core focuses or strengths within their business. I have value to provide to the first or second graders, right? I don't need to be a 12th grader in order to teach the first and second graders. So that really helped me overcome my imposter syndrome, and that being a big challenge for me is that knowing that yes, there's always somebody who knows more than you. There's always going to be a resident expert, and you should strive to that level. But that shouldn't stop you from teaching the first and second graders, the newer entrepreneurs who are starting with that journey or know absolutely nothing about the domain that you've started to carve out expertise. And so that for me was kind of how I moved past it.
And you, that's great. Thank you for sharing with me and everyone who's listening and watching of a conversation I had way back when. I just started in the adult business world, and a business owner took me aside and said, "George, how do you feel about what you do?" I said, "Well, I'm doing the best I can with what I know." He said, "Do you feel as though you know all there is to know about what you do, or that everybody else knows more?" And I thought, wow, that's a good question. And he says, "I sense that you're not totally comfortable with what you know. He says, keep in mind, with what you're doing, you know more than most everybody else on the face of the earth about what you're doing. Yes, I agree with, with what you just said. There's always going to be somebody who knows more than you do about a certain topic, inescapable. But that helped me way back when I had hair and it was dark, uh, that uh, to keep going forward. So I took it upon myself to learn as much as I could about those areas that I was felt I was falling short in. And that goes back to what you were saying in terms uh, of learning more, applying what you learn, and keep going forward. The inspiration turning into motivation, and wow, it helped me. Uh, and I remember that conversation, which happened decades ago, as though it happened just a couple, 3 weeks ago. Now,
That's awesome.
that I guess one question is, and you started your business from scratch. That any business that starts from scratch and even is maybe established, there can be external factors. COVID is the most recent example of external factors that can impact the business. In so many cases during 2020, 2021, negatively impacting businesses. But how, in the business owners that you're working with, how do you find that they are dealing with financial instability when it's really no fault of their own that things have become unstable?
I think that this is a really tough question, because while going back to primary inspiration, I mean, one of the weakest inspiring causes that, in my opinion, that can cause somebody to open a business is the desire to make money. But the reality of the situation is that the need to make money exists for almost all of us, you know? And so our business has to make sense to us personally, but it also has to make dollars and cents, right? So when times are unstable, I think you can do things to mitigate it, but you also have to develop a certain level of like mental toughness around it. It's like the stock market, right? The stock market goes up and down. And every time it goes up, people get this irrational exuberance and they feel like it's going to go up forever. And every time it goes down, it feels like the world is ending and crashing and the economy will dissolve as we know it, right? And if you look back in historical context or you look at the habit patterns or actions that you've established and that market has established, that's not true, right? So I think grounding yourself to motivation, to daily discipline, to habits, like aligning those specifically with financial metrics around your business, like understanding what it is that you need to make and what it is you would like to make. A reality of entrepreneurs is when times get tough, like our lifestyles need to contract and we need to be willing to do that. But understanding where your numbers are, I think, is a really tough or important, not just it's a tough task, but it's a really important task for everybody to learn how to conquer for their particular situation. Also, compounding on that is particularly with financial instability when you're starting, don't put yourself in that scenario. The beautiful thing about a lot of the economy we live in and certain things, unless with absolute certainty and you have the driving motivation and talent and skill to open a particular facet of business, most of us have the opportunity to dabble or kind of start our business on the side and work into that. Don't necessarily burn the boats always. It's glorified, I feel like, a lot in our society is like you always have more time. Plan B distracts from plan A. You can have a plan A, but you don't always have to burn the boats to get there. And if you have something relatively safe or a source of income that covers your minimum lifestyle, then you just invest everything incrementally above that into becoming an entrepreneur. I think that really, while it's not a luxury afforded to everybody depending on their certain situation, burn the boats isn't always the answer. Sometimes having a safety net while you start and then intelligently knowing your numbers and working into your business full time, where you know you have a nest egg and you're grounded and you have some consistent customers with consistent cash flow, that is a way to approach it in my head, where you kind of mitigate that financial instability piece.
You used an expression three, four, five times in your recent comment that some people who are listening and watching may have not heard the expression before, and that's burn the boats. What do you mean by that?
It basically means it's a metaphor or analogy for saying, you know, if you're an explorer, right, and you hop on a boat and you go somewhere and you have a certain task to accomplish, or a soldier like going out to war, some of the old practices in certain stories would be burning the boats. It means that retreat's not necessarily an option. You have no blanket or safety net. You can't just get on the boat and go home. The only path forward is forward. So that's where the kind of expression comes from, burn the boats, that I was using.
No, that's good. It makes a lot of sense. There's time that for a goal to be meaningful, one of the eight qualifiers, that's three beyond the normal SMART goal approach, is stated with no alternatives. And burning the boats is a good example of having no alternatives.
Yeah.
Victory is a must. Now, it doesn't always come easily, but if you keep going forward, no matter what, uh, victory can be achieved. In this case, business success can be achieved. That uh, do you have your reader? I'm guessing by the books in the background, other things that you've shared with me. But are there any particular books that you would recommend that would be helpful to people who are considering getting into business for themselves?
I like the book, I believe, by James Cleary. Specific, plenty of great book recommendations, but for today on our topic, the book Atomic Habits, I think is very powerful. It knowing kind of yourself as like a human being and how habit loops can get formed. I think that book was really valuable in deconstructing how we think about things and what are the implementation steps and action steps to establish good habits, because I think it's important. You know, one of the hardest things is change, and beyond change is changing yourself, right? Let alone other people. I think Marcus Aurelius said, the hardest part about change is that you're both the marble and the sculptor, right? So you're having to chisel away at your own imperfections with the tendency to want to avoid that pain. Atomic Habits is helpful, you know, breaking things down into the rational steps of how to get from point zero of having no habits to establishing good ones that serve you. That's my book recommendation of the day. How about you, George?
There's a number of books that address the issue of entrepreneurship. I would urge everyone to just go to Google and even more so, go to Amazon and entrepreneurship books. And there's a abundance of books that they can and will find and read the synopsis. They'll find one that really works for them. A lot of the books that have read, am reading, have to do with a ongoing business in various aspects, leadership, financial responsibility, so on and so forth. Thus, my comment that people go to Amazon and or Google to come up and find just, I'd say, no more than two books.
Mm.
And usually anywhere from around 150 to 200 pages in length. Makes for a good read, makes for a quicker read. And I don't know about you, but every time I read a book, I have one of these.
Yellow highlighter. Yeah.
Yeah. Take any book that I've read, open it to any page, and you're going to see some yellow. So that it also helps in retention of what it is that's being read. So, yeah, I'd say, uh, again, let your good sense be your guide, using common sense, Find something that you feel is a good read for you. Read it, no more than 2 books. And then there's others that you can read after you've started your business to help you in particular areas that you feel you need help in.
Awesome. So then, kind of closing out, we're getting close to time here. Parting advice for new entrepreneurs, George. What's a piece of advice you would give to someone wanting to leave a stable job or starting their journey into entrepreneurship? What advice would you give them on overcoming the challenges of being their own boss?
Do your homework, do your homework, and do your homework. In doing the homework, it's allowing yourself to apply those massive doses of common sense. And, in terms of leaving a stable job, stability, if you're talking financial stability, that's an issue. A person should have at their disposal 3 to 6 months worth of funds so that if the business takes that long to start producing an income for the business owner, then they can make decisions they have to make rather than decisions they're forced to make. And there's a difference between the two. So again, and it's a little bit different for each person, but do your homework, do your homework, and do your homework. How about you?
I like that. So mine would be I'll build on what you said. Sticking with the topic of what I said today, eliminate the need to make decisions. Write things down, systemize it for yourself. Like, be your own boss. If you're going to be your own boss, be your own boss. Assign yourself tasks, write it down, do your homework like you said. I think is fantastic advice. Really getting yourself to a point where your inspiration is established and your goal is in mind, but quickly moving to a point where you establish your daily routine and your activities. That's going to carry you through the tough times too. When your emotions are screaming at you to do something else, that because you had a plan and you have habits and you have actions, that you can establish a more positive thought pattern to get you through the tough times. But that's all I got. That's it for today's episode of the Aspiration Avenue. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you next time, everyone.